Hello everyone, thanks for joining. So I am just using gouache sheets by Zen Sangam. This is 300 GSM. So if you have a masking tape, you can use it. It's just optional. You can also proceed without it. I think I will not be using the masking tape on these sides. I'll just keep it on these two sides. So here's what we'll be painting today. So as you can see, this is violet. I'm using violet. These are acrylic paints that I'm using, but you can also use gouache or poster colors. We'll need violet and orange for this. And black for the silhouette objects. And white for our blending and color mixing. So let's start with the violet shade on the top, and then we'll slowly move downwards. So I'm going to take a flat brush. For blending, this is the best. Flat brushes of any size would be okay. Let's start. So if you have like liquid acrylic paints of this consistency, you don't have to mix a lot of water actually. If your paint is in tubes, just mix some amount of water so that it comes to this consistency. And we'll start on the top. Make sure you're following a single direction for one coat. So I didn't mix any water because my paint was already liquefied. So after you've painted some portion of the sheet, let's say this much or this much, depending on how big your sheet is, we have to lighten the shade. This you can pick violet, blue, red, anything of your choice. So the idea is to start with a darker shade and then gradually lighten the shade. That's how you achieve the blending. So I'm just going to take some amount of white. Not a lot, just some, and mix it here. So if you're a beginner and you haven't tried acrylic and gouache that much before, and you're confused how people blend, the first tip I would give you is to use a cold press sheet, because you can see there are tiny holes in here, right? So this is the best choice because your blending will happen in an easier way. So I just reduced some amount of the purple or the violet shade. So this is the darker shade, and next what I'm going to paint is a little light. Leave a small gap in between, a thin line Just you can see that I've left a thin line in between. So to blend it properly, what you'll have to do is wash off your brush. Let me show you. Wash off your brush. Remove the excess water and keep like very less water here. And then cover the gap. Go over it a few times. But again, if you leave a very huge gap, then the sheet would not have any paint and only water. It won't look good. So you have to make sure that you have like just the right amount of gap in between. This way you would have, let me bring it up a little closer. So you can see that there's like this is how we blend. You can see that the gap is covered here. And this is like moving from one shade darker to one shade light. So we'll just keep repeating these steps. So now I'm going to mix some more white. I'm just doing the same thing again. See, the thin line I was talking about should only be this much, not more. Okay. So now again, I'm repeating the same. I'm going to wash off my brush. Remove the excess water. Make sure you have a little bit of water left on the brush. It shouldn't be entirely dry. Let's repeat the same thing. So here, this has not yet been blended entirely because this part has a lot of water, and these tiny holes you see, we have to cover it up. I'm just going to use some more white to get to the same shade. And just paint on top of it where the holes were visible earlier. I'm just going to paint over it one more time. So again, you can see this is not at all blended yet. I'm going to repeat the same thing. Wash off my brush and just go over it a few times till I can see the blend. So like I said before, this necessarily doesn't have to be purple. You can use any shade you want. I just picked night sky, so I'm using dark shades. You can have probably like ultramarine blue, or you can have crimson red, and any dark shades would go well. Okay, so again, let's add some more white to neutralize. So this portion would be where the orange from the below and the purple or violet would merge. So this has to be a light shade kind of. So you can see I'm using a lighter shade than before. Okay. So again, washing off the brush, covering the gap. So this process of covering the gap thing that I just taught you, you have to do it before your paint dries out. Otherwise, the thing is it won't look just as good, or the finishing won't come out that great. So here you see, I can still see the dots. This is not yet blended properly. So if you have something like this, all you'll have to do is paint another layer on top of it. So if your sheet is very thin, you won't face this problem that much. So I'm just going, just to cover it up, I'm painting on top of it. So now I can do the blending. Okay, this is done. So now you can see we've gradually moved from a darker shade to lighter shades. So this is what I've done here as well. So now you can either start with orange and go upwards, like we start painting orange here and then go upwards, or we lighten the orange shade to almost get kind of a tinted or like a cream color here and then move downwards. So I would suggest we will start with orange. So again, my paint is kind of watery, which is why I won't be using water to mix it. Let's go. So I'm starting from below and I'm going to leave some gap here because anyway we will have the silhouette objects, right? So I'm not going to paint on the below. So this is orange. I'm going to just use white immediately after I paint orange instead of mixing. Just on top of it, I dip my brush in white and then I'm painting on top of it. Just a little above where we painted the orange. And again, I'm washing off my brush. Going to just go over it one time. I'll leave a thin gap here. And we need some more white to cover this part where the two colors are merging. I'm just using some white on my brush and going over it. Again, washing off my brush. All you have to do is be very careful that your brush is not too dry, or it should also not be too wet. So make sure you keep checking the amount of water your brush can hold in. So as you can see, this is not yet properly blended. I'm just taking some more white to paint on top of it, just to cover the blending difference that you see between the two colors. So if you feel like it's not yet blended, right, all you have to do is paint another layer. That's all. I think we're good. So more or less this part is where you should be kind of careful, because gradually decreasing one shade lighter and painting is kind of easy, but the place where you have to merge two colors, two or more colors sometimes, is where it gets tough. So, and you cannot achieve it by painting just one layer. You have to work on it, probably like this needed just two layers for now, but if you're painting on a canvas, it requires more than that. You have to probably paint it like 3 times to get the finishing. So now we will need black. I'm going to use black to paint these trees and house and some of the other objects here. And you will need you can still use flat brush, but again, round brush is recommended, because if you want to get these objects, trees and such objects right, you will need a round brush. So that's what I'm using now. This is size 5, but again, you can use anything. Any round brush would do. So I'm just gonna get my black paint. And let's paint the below thing first, okay? We'll work on the rest later. Just cover this up. I'm just filling it. This is kind of rough. From which brush? This is a round brush that I'm using. A round brush of any size is good, because the trees and other things are kind of, you need detailing, right? So it would be better to use a round brush. So I covered it, and now we'll be doing grass, or you can do whatever you want. And just, sorry, the background. The background, this is a flat brush. For blending, flat brush is recommended because it gets easier. And the paint application is easy with a flat brush. So I'm just randomly dabbing the brush. Let me zoom it up a little. So all I'm doing is randomly dabbing in all directions to paint the grass. Use the pointy end of the brush because that's where, that's the place where you get the texture of grass. So I'm just using the pointy end of the brush. I'm doing it in random places. You can also do it, you can make it this big or any size. I'm not sure if I can zoom it in. Nope. Okay. Okay, I think I don't want to do more grass. Let's paint some houses of buildings here. I'm just taking some more black. And make just rectangles or squares or any kind of houses you would like. So as you can see, this is pretty random. Just I'm just making random squares and rectangles to fill up the space. Put the outline first, then color it. So I'm just covering the remaining places other than the bushes or the grass thing we did. Just randomly adding buildings here. So as you can see, this is done. You can add trees and other stuff here. Let's make pine trees or some palm trees. So for palm trees, just randomly draw like 4 or 5 of these, this thing first. Then start by, if you can make palm trees leaves only if you have like a round brush with a pointy end, because it needs to be, the leaves kind of need to be straight, and this is kind of detailed, right? So, and you have to apply the least amount of pressure. Ta-da! So you can do any kind of trees here. As you can see, I made something else in this one. So you can do any tree. I didn't want to do a same one, so I'm doing palm trees in this. You can do trees of different heights. One can be probably like this big here. So it doesn't matter. do the outline and then start working on the leaves. So if you're a beginner and you don't know how to blend the background, it would be a little difficult if you don't take cold press sheets, but then it's not impossible, but I would recommend you to use cold press sheets. That's why I wanted to show how it works. I picked a cold press sheet only today. There are acrylic sheets with lines. I can show it to you sometime later. It's also a product from Zen Sangam, which is great. So if you're learning how to paint with acrylic paints and you want to learn how to blend your sky or anything on the background, then anything textured would be great because it's easy to work with and you can put like 3-4 layers on top of another and it works out well. So if you mess it up, you can add another layer. But if your sheet is kind of thin and if it's not, if it's like 100 GSM, you only have one chance. You can't keep applying more layers on top. So I think I don't want to do more trees. 3 trees look good enough. Again, you can do anything in this. You can paint pine trees. You can make the electric wire, electric poles. Anything's okay. And we'll have to do electric wires also here. If you have a black pen, I would definitely recommend you to use that. I'm also not an expert. I have shaky hands. If you have a pen, right, you can do it in a single shot. It won't take this long. So I'm just trying to make some realistic wire thing here. Okay. Let's add 1 or 2 more lines. If you have a pen, this is a lot easier. It gets over in 2 seconds. I take some time to paint with a brush. If you have a round brush of size 1 or 2, it's a lot easier as well because it's too pointed. Just going to make some twisted wires thing in this so that it looks real. Something like this, yeah. I use them to make my stars and cover up, use it like a whitener sometimes. Just going to randomly add so I added stars randomly. A little big. So I'm just taking some amount of white. I need another brush. Okay. So white and dilute it. Put a lot of water. This is for the glow or the shine around the moon. So I'm just going to dilute it a lot. And then you can place it anywhere. So this is really diluted, okay? This is not real paint. So once it dries, it goes a little lighter than what you see now. So let's say we'll make a moon of this small size. I'm just going to paint everywhere around it. Now wash off the brush and just the parts where you have not painted, next to it, use the brush with just water. Just around it. Because it should look like it's a part of the sky. It shouldn't appear on like on top of it or something. So I'm just trying to blend this thing with the sky in the background. Okay. So we'll have to wait for this to dry up now. So let's say you make your moon this big, then you can paint the diluted part even more. You can take it further. So make sure you wait till this is dry before you paint the moon. So now that it's dry, I'm going to paint the moon. Again, this is detailed or like small things that we're trying to do. So use a round brush. That this is probably like a 1 or 2 size. Okay, this is a 0 size brush. So use small ones. So you can now get what I was trying to tell. This once it dries, it's like a kind of a lesser shade, and then inside we'll do the moon. So it looks like it's the glow or the light around the moon. You can do those for stars as well. It kind of looks nice. So another suggestion while removing the tape is to not remove it in this way, but do fold your tape to form a right angle triangle like this, and then pull it. Just make sure that you don't, peel off the paper also.